So the way that I would define imposter syndrome is someone who actually has the skills, knowledge, capabilities to do the role that they're doing at work, but they don't necessarily see that in themselves. So they think that they aren't qualified and they don't think that they're able to show up and do that role, even though they are 100% qualified and can do the role.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Take 2 Minutes podcast. I'm your host and founder of Take2Minutes.org, Mark Fassel. Joining me this week is Natasha Tekeste. Natasha is an HR professional and career coach who specializes in helping professionals break free from limiting beliefs and break through the $50,000 to $90,000 salary range and achieving a six-figure income. Natasha is also the co-host of a podcast called Making Work Fun, where she talks about ways to incorporate more mindfulness and ease at work. It's available on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Natasha, welcome to the show. It's great to have you on.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here today.
And we touched on some of your background initially, and I added in there, what did I add in there when I was talking just then? Breaking free from limiting beliefs. Is that something you also, we didn't really touch on that. Talk about breaking free from limiting beliefs.
Yeah, definitely. So I predominantly work with women and women at work who want to earn a little bit more money at work. And oftentimes these people struggle with things like imposter syndrome or a lack of confidence or just a lack of their own belief in themselves to jump into a six-figure salary, to earn six figures at work. And so I really help them learn how to shift their relationship with money, their relationship with themselves, and how they show up at work.
I'd like to talk about imposter syndrome as something that's talked about, I hear more frequently. How would you define it and maybe give some examples?
Yeah, definitely. That's a really good question. So the way that I would define imposter syndrome is someone who actually has the skills, knowledge, capabilities to do the role that they're doing at work, but they don't necessarily see that in themselves. So they think that they aren't qualified and they don't think that they're able to show up and do that role, even though they are 100% qualified and can do the role. And so some examples of that is oftentimes with people jumping into like more senior positions at work or leadership roles at work where they've been at the organization for a really long time. They're maybe SMEs or subject matter experts in their field, but they just don't feel confident in themselves to lead a project, or they don't feel confident in themselves to maybe show up and take charge of a situation or put their hands up to lead a presentation. They just feel like they need to keep getting more experience or maybe enhancing their education rather than recognizing that they can show up exactly as they are and they do have the skills and the qualifications to be able to do that position.
I think a lot of people have probably had that at some point in time in their career. How do you help someone get past that?
Yeah, totally. That's a great question. So the first thing we need to do is actually look at why you have those beliefs in the first place. So it's like, what are those beliefs? And we actually need to, they're different for everyone. Not everyone has the same limiting beliefs, or not everyone has the same beliefs about themselves that lead them to feeling like an imposter. So the first thing we need to do is understand the beliefs that you have and the things that are holding you back. And a lot of the times what we do, specifically with my clients who are women, is we talk about where those beliefs come from. And a lot of them come from our socialization, especially as people who live in various marginalized identities and not in the dominant group in society. And so we question, where those beliefs came from, whether or not they're beliefs that we want to hold on to and want to keep for ourselves. And one of the questions that I love to ask my clients is, who benefits when you hold that belief? So if you have a belief that tells you that maybe you're not ready to earn six figures at work because you haven't gotten the skills or the education yet, even though you actually do have the skills and education, if you ask yourself who benefits, it's usually not you that benefits from it. And so do you want to keep holding a belief system that is holding you back from stepping into what you want to create in your own life? And
you said skills and education. Something I think is important for people, individuals at work, is I believe, and I've been a manager or leader or employer for decades, I find that really comes down to skills more than education. You can learn things in school, you can learn certain things in school, but when it comes to a job, quite often, in my opinion, it comes down to your experience, and not even always your experience, but your attitude and willingness in that job is really more important than your education. And I know that not everyone's going to agree with that opinion always, and that's fine. That's why we all have opinions. But ultimately, I've had great success just hiring largely based upon personality and past experience.
Yeah, I was going to add that when you were kind of talking about skills, I think the two most important things are your attitude, your willingness to, show up and try and learn, and then also your background and your skills is relevant. But after doing I've done probably thousands of interviews and, hiring positions throughout my career, and the attitude and your willingness to just show up and learn is so important. And it's such an identifier for someone who is going to be more successful in that position, in that organization, or throughout their career.
Yep. I've always said it's attitude over aptitude.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with that.
So we jumped right into it, and I didn't really give a good introduction of your background. I thought I would let you do it, and I sometimes jump around, and I have a wonderful individual on my team named Ashley who always gives me a hard time for jumping around. And so this is a little shout out to her. Let's take a step back now and let you tell us a little bit more about yourself, in addition, greater than what I gave for the intro, and how you got started as a career coach.
Yeah, definitely. So my professional background is in human resources. I've worked in HR for over a decade in a variety of different departments and in a variety of different organizations. So I've worked in government and also in several industries. And so throughout that time in HR, I constantly saw people who felt a lack of confidence in themselves and who really discounted their beliefs at work. And this was people who were high achievers. So people who are doing really well at work, but they would be really anxious about going to performance review conversations, or they just didn't feel qualified to apply for a promotion or to land a more senior position. And they didn't really negotiate their salaries in the recruitment process. And I just constantly saw this happening over and over again. And while I was kind of working in HR, I was also completing my master's degree in adult education and learning. And a lot of what we talked about in our master's degree program was specific to just how when you acquire more knowledge and you learn how to become more of a critical thinker, you can become more present and an active citizen in your life, in your community, and take more of a deeper role in the things that you want to be doing. And so I just saw a lot of parallels in, the gaps that I was seeing at work with these high performing women who really doubted themselves, and also your ability to kind of think critically about some of the things that you've been offered in society and whether or not you want to accept those beliefs and start to question things a little bit differently. And so that was when I decided to jump into the coaching space and coaching world. And so I was certified as a coach. Along the way, I also got a certification as a mediator and a negotiator, so helping people learn how to negotiate conversations. And so I've been able to kind of couple, my different background and education and experience to support my clients just find a little bit more confidence in themselves in order to, I guess I would say, follow their dreams. It sounds really general, but, just achieve a goal and set out to do something and earn more money, even if it feels really unattainable or unachievable, because they just haven't been taught that it's something that they can do for themselves.
Very good. How much do you prioritize mental health to individuals? And also when you were or still are an HR professional, a lot of companies don't look at mental health for their employees. What are your thoughts on mental health activities and wellness offerings by HRs?
Yeah, definitely. So I'm also a certified yoga teacher, and I teach a lot of yin yoga, yoga nidra. I focus more on kind of the slower paced relaxation type of yoga, because I find that a lot of times our lifestyle is focused on go, go, go. And we get a lot of that yang focused energy just from our day-to-day lives. So
Right.
We need to learn how to slow down and be present and take time just for ourselves. So while I was working in HR, I taught yoga classes kind of before and after work. And then a few of my colleagues and I incorporated stretching breaks and just things like that to just help people find a little bit more mindfulness and ease in their day-to-day lives. So I think that's especially a really important part of someone's work, how they show up to work, and just finding that balance in themselves.
I'm talking to you already. You're a high energy individual, much like myself. Usually I talk kind of fast and have a lot of passion when I'm talking and excitement. I do find it interesting. And I had a podcast yesterday with someone where I was the guest, and she had a very, very calm demeanor. Her talk was very slow and very calming. And it was nice to talk to those persons because it helped calm me down a little bit too. Not that what you and I do is wrong by any means. It's interesting to see the difference in persons who have other podcasts and how calm they can be. And I think sometimes, going back to yoga, where this was going, yoga can sometimes help calm me down as well. And I found that slower paced yoga, and I'm not a yoga expert. I've been doing yoga for probably 14 years, but much of it's been just in my house. Once I learned some of the poses, and I found that if I kind of mix a little bit of yoga with meditation, so going into a pose and trying to hold that pose for 30 seconds, 45 seconds, maybe even a minute, while just breathing and focusing on my breathing, really does help calm me down and get into a better mindset. So it's kind of mixing a little bit of meditation with yoga in that capacity.
Totally. That's so important. And even just like in a lot of my yoga practices, what we've talked about or learned is that the breath is really just like a foundation to helping calm your nervous system, to help slow yourself down. And so we always incorporate breathing exercises into that yoga class. And that's something that is accessible for you at any point in time, which is what I really love about breathing exercises, is you don't need to be dressed up in a yoga class in your yoga gear, right? You can just kind of carry that for you. And you can also just like step away from stressful periods of time and just like run to the bathroom and do some breathing exercises, or even just pause at your desk before you go into a meeting. So it's something that's always accessible to people.
From an HR perspective, I've seen more companies give offerings to employees around mental health apps or access to mental health activities. Have any of the companies you have been a professional, HR professional at, offered anything like that?
Totally. One of the things that I've seen a lot with organizations, and it's maybe not called the same thing in the US, but in Canada, we call them EFAP, so Employee Family Assistance Programs. So a lot of organizations offer things like that. And so you can tap into counselors and different types of people that can support you with any issue you might be struggling with. And what I love about these types of programs is that they're anonymous. So you can just call up someone, usually 24/7, and get some support and help with anything you might be struggling with from a mental health standpoint. And your family members can actually access this service for free too, which I think is really cool because although like, you know, you have to show up in a certain way at work in terms of like being a professional, if you work in a corporate environment, that doesn't negate the fact that we all are humans living normal human lives. And sometimes there are very real challenges that are happening outside of our work environment, and we need that support to be able to show up at work. And so just knowing that a lot of organizations offer that type of support, I think, and utilizing it, knowing that it's anonymous and you can just like, they're going to pay for it whether or not you use it or not. So you might as well just call and use it. It's a really cool service that folks are, you know, can utilize.
Getting help from therapists is obviously one thing that many people need, and there's no it's needed by some people. It's absolutely needed. There's also self-help programs. You know, Take 2 Minutes offers many ways of helping with mental well-being, and it's not a replacement for therapy by any means. But I have a couple companies, just a couple though, that are offering Take 2 Minutes to their employees, so employees have access to meditations, have access to gratitude journaling, 3 good things, activities that help them get into a better mind space. And I think it's important for more companies to offer those. And I hear about more and more doing it here in the U.S. even right now. But I think it's important for more companies, especially smaller companies. When I say smaller, 100, 200, 300 employees, to still make sure they offer something in that area. Because if you have if you offer those things, you're offering an employee more, and they're going to appreciate that too. Someone who has a good mental state is going to be more productive or more apt to show up for work even. And I think there's a study, I have the data somewhere, it's somewhere around the lines of $200 million are lost every year to mental well-being illness in the workplace. So I think when companies do offer it, it helps negate some of that loss for a person being out or being absent from work.
Of course. And I think it's really common now to see people step away from work for periods of time for stress leave. And so if you can support employees before burnout and stress actually takes them out of the workplace, that is going to save the employer so much money over time from having an unfilled position or trying to hire someone to fill that position temporarily or whatever other gaps are there. And so it's really beneficial to the organization to support their employees. And then it's also really helpful for the employees to learn how to manage their day-to-day stress.
Right. What are some common signs of a toxic work environment you've observed from your clients or from your experiences?
Yeah, I think a lot of times it depends on how the individual feels. Like if you notice yourself going into the environment and feeling really, really tense and feeling like your nervous system just really activating, it may or may not necessarily be a quote unquote toxic environment, but there is something that isn't working for you in that environment. And that's a sign that you need to address something before it ends up getting any worse. So it's like, yeah, of course, there's things like gossip or yelling or just inappropriate behaviors. But even if those things aren't necessarily happening and you feel like you're anxious to check your emails or you feel stressed out about having a conversation with someone at work or things just feel really unsettled, those are signs to me that something isn't working well for you and that maybe you do need to make some changes. So either have some conversations with people at work or have some serious conversations with yourself about what isn't working and maybe finding a different pathway that might alleviate some of that stress.
I've consulted for years at many different companies. And one thing I've noticed, I'm not going to name any companies by any means, but I have noticed that how leadership leads can largely dictate the culture and how the company and employees feel at that company. To expand that a little bit more, if you have leaders who are instilling ownership and almost combatantness to take ownership of projects, I feel that leads to an environment which isn't as friendly and kind as leaders who lead with kindness and let people recognize their worth in the company and show value to the employees. I can see a huge difference in how the leaders lead and how the employees feel about the company.
Yeah, definitely. And I would say it's never always holistically a company. You can even isolate different departments. Yes. So you can have one company with different leaders in different departments, and one department is thriving and feels so valued, and you can tell that they are full of high performers. And then another one is full of anxious people who are taking stress leave and not really wanting to show up. And a lot of it depends on the leader's style and how they're connecting with their employees and how they're valuing the people that work there. Yeah, I definitely agree.
Absolutely. That's very important, I think. Not that we can change other people, but leaders who lead with that positivity make a big difference on how much the employees want to show up for work and actually be there.
Totally. And I would even say another thing that I've known to notice to myself that I really value is just leaders who are really direct in their feedback and in their expectations. So it's almost very settling to know, what the expectation is for a certain project, what the deliverable is, and whether or not you're meeting that expectation, instead of just second guessing and having to make assumptions based on how a leader is treating you in the environment. And so I think it's helpful to have a really positive leader who's focused on your development and helping and supporting you, but also someone who is honest and transparent and willing to help you, even if there are challenges at work, so you don't feel like you're all alone and just struggling by yourself.
It would be difficult to try to make suggestions to your leader or leaders about how to change what they're doing. But aside from that, and you touched on this earlier, so I'm going to just revisit it. What advice would you give to someone who's currently dealing with a toxic work environment?
Totally. So the first thing that I would offer is that I would suggest that they just take a little moment to check in with themselves and figure out okay, what is working about my current situation? What do I like about my current situation? And then what do I not like about my current situation? So just taking a little moment to just pause, because I think oftentimes in situations like that, we become really reactive and we just want to jump to a conclusion. But just giving yourself a little bit of time to just be really honest with yourself, I think is helpful. The other thing is to know that you always have choices. oftentimes people in work environments think that they have no choices and they have to just stay in that position and that's the only thing that they can do. And that can be one of the most unhelpful belief systems that you keep for yourself, because then you have no way out and the only thing left for you is to just be stuck in this negative toxic environment, and that can be just so smothering for yourself. So the next thing you want to do is just try to see the choices that are available. And they may not be amazing choices. I'm not trying to suggest that all the choices are choices that you might be happy with, but just taking ownership of the choices that you do have and the power that you do have in that situation can totally transform your relationship to that toxic environment, because you can decide to stay in that environment and try to make some changes, or you can decide to leave that environment. There may be consequences with each choice that you make, but just knowing that you have the power to choose, I think is a really important part of it.
To expand on that too, just to everything you said there, I was reflecting on my job, and it's one of those things where there's always going to be frustrations in your job. There's always going to be things that don't go the way you want them to go. There's going to be conflict in every job, and it's just unfortunate, but it happens. And something that I found that I do, and this touches on, I think, some of the things you were just talking about, is I try to make a point not to react, or at least not to react too quickly. So when I'm told something that I don't gel with well, instead of making a knee-jerk response, sometimes I will take a seat and think about it, sometimes even for overnight. And then the next day I'll have a much better response that I think is more constructive than the response I would have had if I would have responded within 5 minutes. And I do think a lot of people, and I'm thinking of one particular individual right now, funnily enough, some people feel like when something like that happens, they get an email they don't like, they need to respond instantly. They need to get a response out. And that's not the case. No one, or if someone is sitting there waiting for your response, that's on them. That's not on you. You need to take your time and make sure your response is thought out and not a knee-jerk reaction.
Yeah, exactly. And even in a conversation, you can just say, I need to think about it.
Yes.
So just owning the fact that you don't have to respond to someone else's urgency in that moment, you can create a little bit of a boundary there and just communicate, when you can get back to them or how much time you need to think about it.
There's a take 2 minutes message somewhere along those lines. I don't remember the exact quote that I wrote down, but it's something along the lines of, don't let others' expectations on you burden you. So just because someone else has an expectation of you doesn't mean you have to live up to that expectation. You are your own person. Their expectation is their issue. It's not your issue to deal with.
Yeah, I love that. That's such a good point, right? It's like other people will always have expectations for you, but you can't run your life based on other people's expectations. Eventually, you have to kind of just own the fact that you're in the driver's seat of your own life and you get to choose. That's a great quote.
Here's a question we touched on earlier, but someone wanted me to ask you specifically, and that is, what practices have you seen implemented in the workplace that prioritize mental health and well-being for their employees? And you've touched on that, but since it was a specific question, I'm going to ask it.
Yeah, that's a great question. So now that summer is coming up here in my neck of the woods in Calgary, Alberta, some of the corporations here actually give their employees Fridays off in the summer, which I think is an amazing practice to just say, you know what, it's summer. For the 2 months of summer, you can take Fridays off. You're not having to make up those extra hours. You're not working, 10-hour days. This is just a benefit that we offer.
That's great.
Yeah, I know. I think that's an amazing practice. And even just having golf days or employee focused days. We have a big celebration in Calgary called Calgary Stampede. So it runs for about 10 days downtown in the summer. And so a lot of offices downtown will just kind of let employees go to the pancake breakfast or go to some of the events and things like that. So there is some flexibility to just almost allow work to happen with the ebbs and flows of the seasons of life as well. We don't need to force people to be at work every single day, every single minute in the summer when we really want to take advantage of the nice weather. Some of the other things that I've seen corporations incorporate is lunch and learns, where they actually have lunches paid for the staff. I think that's a really nice thing. So you're bringing in an outsider expert on some sort of topic, providing lunch for them and just giving them that space to just have, learn about a topic, ask questions. I've seen corporations offer like yoga classes or do like cooking classes or just do like team building activities that just kind of get you out of the workplace. So I think just like letting people have a bit more balance at work instead of treating them as maybe like robots who are just needing to like stick to this schedule and then just be done with the work kind of thing. So just incorporating the humanness and the human aspect of work.
It's great. Do you have any suggestions for how an employee can advocate for their mental health and help foster a healthier work culture? This is a tough one because it's hard to make suggestions depending on where you're at in the company and your role. It's hard to make suggestions up that are going to take effect. But do you have any suggestions for that?
Yeah, totally. I would say if your employer has like a health and safety committee or a wellness committee, why don't you take a role in that committee? And that way you'll understand what the budget is, what the priorities are, and then you might have more of a voice in what types of health and wellness benefits you want to see in the organization. So that could be a really good way of making like a tangible or concrete impact in the things that you want to see moving forward.
I'm going to shift a little bit now to your professional coaching. We've already talked about it a little bit, but just to restate as a starting point again, what do you offer? I think you said already your primary client is women. So what do you offer and how do you help individuals who are needing assistance?
Yeah, definitely. So what I focus on is two things. So we focus on strategy and mindset. So when it comes to mindset, we're really looking at their beliefs around, like we talked about earlier, like imposter syndrome, their beliefs about money, their beliefs about their own confidence in themselves and like speaking up at work. And then when I talk about strategy, we're looking at their resume, their cover letter, their LinkedIn profile. We're talking about ways to show up in an interview and how to respond to different types of interview questions and helping them feel more prepared so that they don't have that like, confusion. I don't know what to say in an interview. And then I'm also helping them feel more prepared when it comes to a salary negotiation. So if they do end up getting a job offer, what does the total compensation package look like? What are some of the benefits or perks that you maybe want to negotiate into that contract? Things outside of just salary, maybe like additional vacation time or personal days or just work from home flexibility. So just helping them feel a little bit more supported and confident and take that like guesswork out of the job search process.
That's great. Excuse me. How many sessions is your typical client? I'm certain your answer would be you want it to be as many as possible because you want to retain clients. But what have you found to be the sweet spot for how many times someone should be seeing you to make a difference in their what they're struggling with?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I really customize my packages. I work with people one-on-one, so I customize it to what I actually think would best support that individual. So usually it's anywhere between 3 and 6 months. And so what we do is for the first month, typically we meet every single week. And then after that, we decide if it would be most beneficial for the individual to meet weekly, or if it would be better for them to meet on a more bi-weekly schedule. So I'm really flexible. I want to make sure that my coaching helps support each person in their own unique situation and with their own needs. And then I also offer like in between session support. So my clients will send me emails of questions they have, or they will send me their resume and I'll give some review and feedback and things like that. So we work together in between the sessions, but we just kind of work together to identify what would be most helpful for them in that situation.
This is always a tough topic for me because I'm not good at it myself, but I do often talk to others about trying to focus less on monetary rewards and more about appreciating what you have. And again, I think it's tough because I can't even say I'm great at it, but I think if each of us or any of us took the time to recognize, again, gratitude, what all we have already, then sometimes the focus on the monetary is needed. Obviously, you have to make a living, you have to live. And so there's some people who, in my mind, are well underpaid and they need to get up to, something more sustainable. However, there's also a balance of just being happy with what you have. What are your thoughts on that?
I agree with that to a point. I think that it just depends on the individual and the situation that they're in, because I think sometimes people use the be happy with what you have against themselves negatively. So I would say that it is a unique phrase that can work for some people, and I agree with it for some people. And then for some other people, if you feel really like negative when you hear that phrase, and if it feels like something that it doesn't resonate with you, maybe that actually isn't a helpful phrase for you. And maybe there actually is a deficit in your compensation that you need to help you feel a little bit more grateful for your situation. And so this makes me think of kind of the studies that we've seen. I'm sure you've seen these studies too, where it's like people need to earn a certain amount of money to feel kind of happy and confident and just feel satisfied in their situation. And any other money doesn't necessarily increase their overall life happiness. But if you make less than an amount, your life satisfaction and happiness is substantially lower. And so that's what that makes me think of. If you're like above that amount, I think there's probably some gratitude practices that you can incorporate into your life. And also some appreciation for what you do have and just being more present in the moment. But if you're someone who is below that amount, I don't want you to take this and then use it negatively against yourself, because it isn't unrealistic for you to maybe want to be compensated more. So that's kind of how I would answer.
And that's well said. I think that's well said, because I was trying to say the same thing. You probably said it better than I. I think in my mind, what I was going at is I know some people that are very highly compensated. I mean, they are living a great life, and really their only focus is how do they make more money. And I think those individuals, sometimes I think, well, you should reflect on what all you have, because you have more than 90% of the population does already. And your focus is really nothing besides making more money. And maybe that's how they find their happiness. But to some extent, I think if you could just recognize what all you have, you could probably sustain and be happy the rest of your life where you're at. And I think that's more where I was going. There are definitely people who definitely need more money also. There's that, I don't know, last study I saw, obviously inflation's happened so much, it's changed since then, but I do know there's that break-even point, or there's a line in the sand where someone needs to make a certain amount to have a comfortable life. And below that, you definitely need to focus on monetary rewards as well.
Exactly.
For your people who are potential new clients, how do they find you? Where do they go?
Yeah, definitely. So if you're interested in learning a little bit more or potentially booking a consult call with me, you can find me on Instagram. My handle is my first and last name. So Natasha, Tekeste. You could go to my website, which again is just my first and last name.com, and send me an email, and I'd be super happy to schedule a consult call with you.
Is there anything else you think we should cover that we haven't with regards to your knowledge, talent, or offerings?
I think we had a really good conversation. I feel like this kind of hit on a few different things, and it was good. I'm happy where we landed.
Good. Well, hopefully some people will reach out to you and you can have a few introductory calls. I appreciate you being on the show. It's been a pleasure speaking with you. And if I can do anything for you in the future, please let me know.
Thank you so much for having me. This was such a pleasure.
Thanks for listening. I hope you found that discussion helpful and interesting. If there are any topics you would like to hear discussed, head over to take2minutes.org and use the Contact Us form to submit your suggestions. Also, if you appreciate our content, sign up for an account at take2minutes.org. Subscriptions help us to continue generating new content. Thanks again.